He said I would buy a Congressman and make basically the problems would go away at that point in time. And that is directed. That will stand in my mind for the rest of time.
The US Coast Guard's Marine Board of Investigation, MBI, recently concluded its final session regarding the tragic loss of the Titan submersible. Testimony was delivered by Captain Jamie Frederick and Scott Talbot, both involved in the Coast Guard's search and recovery efforts. They outlined the sequence of events that unfolded after the Titan vanished during its ill-fated dive to the Titanic wreckage on June 18, 2023. Captain Frederick noted that this was the first deep-sea rescue operation the Coast Guard had conducted in over 3 decades. He further revealed that OceanGate, the company responsible for the Titan, had never provided the Coast Guard with a rescue plan. Despite the absence of a formal rescue strategy, the Coast Guard quickly responded. Aircraft were dispatched to the search area, some of which deployed sonar buoys that soon detected knocking sounds coming from beneath the surface. On June 19th, the Navy informed the Coast Guard that an anomaly consistent with an implosion had been detected around the time the Titan went missing. However, due to the classified nature of the information and the uncertainty of its relevance, combined with the knocking sounds heard from the aircraft, Frederick chose not to share this information with the public or the families of those on board. A statement was also read from the captain of the Polar Prince, the surface support vessel that had been accompanying the Titan. He reported that, in hindsight, he had felt the ship shudder at the time communications were lost with the submersible, but he had dismissed the sensation as insignificant at the time. It wasn't until the arrival of a deep-sea robot, the Odysseus, on June 22nd that the wreckage of the Titan was located on the ocean floor, confirming that the vessel had imploded. At that point, it became evident that OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush and the 4 other passengers on board had perished. The day prior to this testimony, Justin Jackson, a materials engineer from NASA, took the stand to discuss the agency's limited involvement in the development of the Titan. Jackson revealed that OceanGate's chief operating officer had initially approached NASA in early 2020 to assist in the creation of a composite hull for the submersible. NASA had signed an agreement under the Reimbursable Space Act agreement and was interested in the project for potential exploration applications. However, the COVID-19 pandemic prevented NASA from moving forward with manufacturing or testing the hull for OceanGate. Jackson explained that while NASA had remotely consulted with OceanGate on a scaled-down version of the hull, their collaboration ended in 2021 after a disagreement over how OceanGate was representing NASA's involvement in its marketing materials. When asked why NASA refused OceanGate's request to use its name in a media release, Jackson stated that the language OceanGate was using implied NASA was endorsing the project, which made NASA uncomfortable. OceanGate had often claimed that both NASA and Boeing were involved in the design and engineering of the Titan, though representatives from both organizations clarified that their roles were minimal. During the hearing, Mark Negley, a materials and process engineer from Boeing, testified that the company had only conducted a feasibility study for OceanGate in 2013. Boeing's involvement was limited to assessing whether a design with adequate buoyancy and safety factors was possible. Boeing did not manufacture any components for the Titan, nor did it provide recommendations on the type of carbon fiber used or participate in materials testing. Negley further explained that Boeing did not collaborate with OceanGate on subsequent requests, possibly due to the high cost of their services. He emphasized that Boeing's role was far more limited than OceanGate had often suggested in public statements. The investigation also delved into OceanGate's regulatory challenges. The Titan had conducted multiple dives to the Titanic wreckage before the June 18th implosion, though it was never classified by any regulatory agencies or registered as a US vessel. Lieutenant CMDR Jonathan Duffett of the US Coast Guard's Office of Commercial Vessel Compliance testified that the Titan met the criteria for classification as a US vessel, as it carried paying passengers, referred to as mission specialists by OceanGate. If registered as a small passenger vessel, the Titan would have been subject to Coast Guard inspection, a process that Rush, OceanGate's CEO, had frequently criticized. John Winters, a marine inspector with the US Coast Guard, also testified about his interactions with OceanGate in 2010, when the company had acquired a submersible called Antipodes. Winters recalled that Rush was frustrated with the regulations that prevented passenger vessels from diving deeper than 150 feet. As a result, OceanGate reclassified the Antipodes as an oceanographic research vessel to circumvent those limitations, and the sub never received a small passenger certificate of inspection. Winters emphasized that during his time working with OceanGate, there was no evidence that the company had attempted to evade regulations. The investigation took a more serious turn when Matthew McCoy, a former OceanGate employee and a member of the US Coast Guard Reserve, testified about Stockton Rush's willingness to engage in questionable practices to advance his missions. McCoy claimed that during a meeting, Rush had suggested that he would buy a congressman to resolve any regulatory issues that might arise. McCoy stated that Rush had mentioned launching expeditions from the Bahamas or Canada to avoid the scrutiny of US authorities. According to McCoy, Rush had previously encountered regulatory resistance from the Coast Guard in California, which prompted him to explore alternative launch locations. When questioned by Jason Neubauer, the chair of the Coast Guard's Marine Board investigation, McCoy confirmed the authenticity of Rush's statement, saying, "That will stand in my mind for the rest of time. I've never had anybody say that to me directly, and I was aghast. After that, I resigned from the company." McCoy's testimony suggested that Rush's willingness to sidestep regulations may have contributed to the design flaws in the Titan, which he had falsely claimed were approved by prestigious organizations like NASA and Boeing. However, following the disaster, these organizations distanced themselves from the project, denying any significant involvement. As the hearings drew to a close, it became clear that several key figures from OceanGate had not been called to testify. Expedition Director Kyle Bingham, Operations Director Scott Griffith, and Rush's wife Wendy, who had overseen communications with the Titan during its final dive, were notably absent from the proceedings. Additionally, no crew members from the Polar Prince had provided testimony. The information gathered about the Titan's last mission largely came from former OceanGate employees and contractors who had left the company before the submersible's fatal implosion. Did the Coast Guard do enough? As the investigation into the Titan submersible unfolded, 2 other Coast Guard employees testified, focusing on the service's oversight of submersible operations. One of the witnesses emphasized that Stockton Rush, the CEO of OceanGate, had not attempted to bypass regulations when using Titan's predecessors for shallower tourist dives off the US coast. However, since the Titan itself was registered in the Bahamas and operated primarily in international waters, US authorities may have been limited in their ability to regulate the submersible. An officer from the Office of Commercial Vessel Compliance suggested that, due to testing conducted near OceanGate's headquarters in Everett, Washington, there was a possibility the Titan might still fall under Coast Guard authority. The MBI panel noted they would seek legal advice to clarify this issue, but if the Coast Guard had regulatory responsibility, it would raise concerns about why they had not thoroughly investigated whistleblower David Lockridge's safety complaints from 2018. The Coast Guard did not directly ask its witnesses about Lockridge's complaint, which had been submitted to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, and shared with the Coast Guard, nor did the Coast Guard request testimony from former Rear Admiral John Lockwood, a member of OceanGate's board since 2013, which some found to be a notable omission in the hearing. Another surprising absence came during Thursday's testimony from Boeing engineer Mark Negley. Negley had assisted OceanGate for nearly a decade with advice and testing equipment, focusing on the challenges of building carbon fiber structures. However, the panel did not inquire about a key email Negley had sent to Stockton Rush in 2018, warning of a significant risk of failure at depths of around 4,000 meters. This email included a chart ominously marked with a skull and crossbones, indicating the high level of danger at those depths. Throughout the week, technical experts provided additional testimony on the design and classification of submersibles. Many expressed skepticism or outright criticism of OceanGate's decision to use a novel carbon fiber hull for the Titan without extensive testing, coupled with the company's reliance on an unproven acoustic monitoring system to assess the hull's integrity in real time. Roy Thomas from the American Bureau of Shipping testified that the sub's hull could experience instantaneous delamination and collapse in less than a millisecond, which would be too fast for any real-time monitoring system to detect. Donald Kramer, a materials engineer with the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, testified that the Titan's wreckage showed signs of manufacturing defects. He described the hull as having peeled apart into layers, consistent with its multi-stage carbon fiber construction. However, Kramer refrained from offering an opinion on what specifically caused the implosion, and neither the manufacturers of the hull nor OceanGate's engineering director from the time of its construction were called to testify. MBI Chair Jason Neubauer addressed some of these absences in a press conference following the hearings. He noted that the board does not have to hear from every possible witness as long as they are able to gather sufficient factual information from other sources, including forensic analysis and testimony. Neubauer explained that the investigation was still ongoing and that the team would continue to collect data in the coming months. One of the key points raised during the hearings was the concerning shift in strain data recorded from the Titan's hull during a dive in 2022, when a loud bang was heard after the sub resurfaced from a Titanic expedition. OceanGate's then Director of Engineering, Phil Brooks, testified that he did not feel qualified to interpret the data at the time, leaving Stockton Rush to personally approve the Titan for future dives. Several witnesses throughout the hearings described Rush as having played a central role in not only OceanGate's business operations, but also its engineering and design decisions. His abrasive personality and temper were also highlighted, suggesting that Rush had a habit of overriding concerns from others within the company. Former OceanGate technician Matthew McCoy, who had worked at the company in 2017, recounted a conversation in which Rush dismissed regulatory concerns by claiming he would buy a congressman to make any problems disappear. McCoy said he resigned the next day. What's next? Now that the public hearings have concluded, the Coast Guard's Marine Board of Investigation will begin preparing its final report. This document could include a definitive cause of the fatal accident, recommendations for future policy and regulations, and even referrals for criminal investigations. A major focus of the report will likely center on the design and structural integrity of the Titan's hull and viewport, both of which were heavily scrutinized during expert testimony. While it's difficult to pinpoint a single cause for the implosion, many witnesses leveled criticism at everyone involved, from designers and manufacturers to OceanGate's leadership team. Stockton Rush, in particular, has been singled out for his decision-making. The Coast Guard's questioning of witnesses in recent days suggests that they are likely to propose significant changes to the regulations governing submersibles. This could include stricter oversight of submersible construction, registration, and operation. Several industry experts who testified during the hearing expressed hope that the tragedy might lead to regulatory changes, making it easier for responsible organizations to operate underwater vessels safely in US waters. However, any changes to the rules are likely to take time. Neubauer indicated that while the Coast Guard's investigation could continue for months, final reports and potential rule changes could take years to implement. In the meantime, the NTSB, along with the governments of Canada and France, is conducting its own investigation into the incident. With OceanGate having ceased all operations following the tragedy, the company is now facing a $50 million lawsuit filed by the estate of one of the Titan's passengers. More legal action is expected in the coming months, further complicating the company's future. For those who paid to experience deep-sea adventures aboard the Titan, the submersible's loss marks the end of a particular era of ocean exploration. During the hearings, Renata Rojas, a customer who had taken a dive to the Titanic in 2022, emphasized that OceanGate never marketed its expeditions as completely safe or routine. It was never sold as a Disney ride, Rojas testified. She drew a comparison to the early days of space exploration, noting that Neil Armstrong never asked whether the Apollo rocket had been officially classed before boarding it for the moon landing. In her view, the Titan was part of an ongoing voyage of exploration, despite its tragic end. Though the Titan's remains now rest in an NTSB laboratory, its implosion will continue to send ripples through the worlds of deep-sea adventure and exploration for years to come. Should OSHA be held responsible for the tragedy? David Lockridge, the whistleblower who first raised concerns about the Titan's safety in 2018, brought attention to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration's OSHA role in the matter. According to Lockridge, OSHA failed in several key areas, providing proper whistleblower protection, thoroughly investigating OceanGate, and preventing the accident from happening in the first place. Lockridge argued that OSHA was not only negligent, but actively harmful. He testified that the agency initially lured him into cooperating with promises of support, only to abandon him after he voiced his concerns. Lockridge further claimed that OSHA officials bullied and gaslit him into dropping his complaints, ultimately congratulating him on what they described as a great outcome for all sides. In Lockridge's opinion, OSHA shares as much responsibility for the deaths of the 5 passengers as OceanGate itself. He described the agency as a coven of bait-and-switch psychopaths who failed to uphold their responsibilities. This has led to a broader debate about OSHA's role in the tragedy. Should the agency be held accountable, and to what extent should it bear responsibility? As the public and regulatory agencies continue to grapple with these questions, the story of the Titan is far from over. While OceanGate is facing legal repercussions and the Coast Guard prepares its final report, many are left wondering how such a disaster was allowed to happen and whether more could have been done to prevent it. If you found this video insightful, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Tomorrow, we'll be back with new updates from the hearing, diving even further into this profound event that has captured the world's attention. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.